Good day, Suidlanders. How are you? We trust that you are well. This is Suidlanders, the week in review. If I look a little bit out of sorts, if this eye looks a little bit bleary, I've got a bit of an infection and I'm feeling a bit out of sorts, but nothing serious. The main items this week, I think, are big items. We're seeing a movement in the price of gold that we haven't seen for many, many years. And right now, it's achieving levels never seen before. It's a little bit up, a little bit down, but on average, much more up than down. We've seen gold break through $2,000, the $2,000 barrier some months ago. Then tracked back, then through the $2,100 barrier, then $2,200, and everybody was very excited. Then WhatsApp messages were going backwards and forwards between various people when gold broke through 2,300, and then in the past week through 2,400 US dollars an ounce, a troy ounce. Not the 28 and some change grams in a standard ounce, but the ounce used to measure metals, which is 31 and some change grams. And that, of course, is a reflection of the economy in the USA, the US dollar, stocks, bonds, BRICS, systems being used to circumvent the SWIFT international payment system. That is to say, systems being devised by China particularly and other BRICS members. It is a reflection of, or an expression of, very many, very large, important events happening in the world today. And it seems reasonable to assume, given that most of those events, if we think about the war in Ukraine, if we think about the US debt of over $34 trillion now, almost $35 trillion, if we think of the bond market, if we think of the Japanese dumping US treasuries, US debt, and so on and so forth, all of these many great events happening in the world, most of them have only gotten started or been recognized by the marketplace in very recent years. So we may expect them to develop a lot more, which shall, of course, have a increased effect, a multiplied effect, a greater effect on gold in the weeks, months, and years to come. According to the Johannesburg High Court, fake meat, or as they call it, Analogue Products, may remain on South African supermarket shelves. The Minister of Agriculture, and I'll have a quick look here, and the Executive Officer for Agricultural Product Standards had directed the Food Safety Agency to remove such products from supermarket shelves, but the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa brought an urgent prayer, that's the correct word, an urgent prayer to the Johannesburg High Court to interdict the Food Safety Agency from removing those shelves, and the prayer was answered by the court. This is a very big thing, ladies and gentlemen. I think that we have lost a succession of battles as conservative Caucasian Christians in South Africa regarding our food over many, many years. We are obliged effectively to pay for the huge costs involved in certifying food kosher we are effectively the ones who carry the overwhelming bulk of the burden of having food certified halal, because it's spread equally, the enormous costs are spread equally over consumers. They are not borne by the Beth Din of the South African jury or the Muslim Judicial Council, I think it's called. They are borne by each and every consumer, pro rata. And now we're losing the battle over what may go into our food. I think I can safely say that nobody wants to pay for another religion's certification of food, to pay for food to be slaughtered or processed or manufactured, as the case may be, in a certain way at certain great cost for another religion. Similarly, in my mind, it is a very similar thing. None of us believes that the courts have acted in our interests in allowing non-meat products to masquerade as meat products. It's very much according to nomenclature. What it amounts to is that they can advertise crickets or soya, or as the case may be, as meat, or the word burger, or the word sausage, or the word wors, or the word nugget, or the word patty. And you would be none the wiser. If you walked into a restaurant and you were served nuggets, chicken nuggets, your kiddies, you would not know from the name that it's fake. In other words, they are not under an obligation to say this is a soya product. They are allowed by law to masquerade behind, or to hide behind, I should say, a name that you automatically and correctly and sensibly associate with meat. It seems a great pity to me. One of the most devious, deceitful, dishonest, double-dealing, duplicitous political events, of which there have been thousands of egregious ones in South Africa, occurred this week. I'm laughing because it's too much for my mind. John Steenhuisen confessed that an ANC MPC, the multi-party charter, a coalition between the ANC and the multi-party charter, might be the least worst option to prevent the doomsday alliance of the ANC, the EFF, and Jacob Zuma's MK party, in the event that the ANC does not obtain a majority in the forthcoming national elections on the 29th of May, and is obliged to seek a partner in Parliament so that it can effectively be the majority. As you're aware, in recent months, polls have revealed that if the elections had taken place on those days, on the days that the polls were conducted, the ANC might have received as little as 36% of the national vote. Let's say 40%, just to be conservative. The ANC would find it very difficult to steamroller certain policies through Parliament We're going to speak about one of them in a minute. But others, such as land expropriation without compensation, the banning of certain firearms ownership statuses, the health insurance policy, national health insurance, the prescribed assets, whereby life insurance companies and other similar entities would be obliged to devote perhaps 20% of their income, or more correctly, revenue, to civil projects by law. It will be very difficult for the ANC to get that right if they've only got 40% or less representation in Parliament. They need a partner, assuming that they don't get 50% or more. They shall need a partner. And John Steenhuisen believes that it would be best if that partner was the multi-party charter led by the Democratic Alliance rather than the EFF and or the MK party. It's a staggering admission. And I think it gives the lie to much of what the Democratic Alliance has represented itself to be over the past, through its various names and changes from the time that it was the Progressive Federal Party. It's fundamentally the same party. Over the past, call it 50 years. About a week ago, we in Van der Kloof, in this village, on the Van der Kloof Dam, formerly the P.K. Leroux Dam, South Africa's second biggest dam, and far and away the most spectacular and marvelous to behold dam of South Africa's large dams. We in Van der Kloof had revealed to us the re-evaluations of our property's values by the municipality for the purposes of establishing or determining our rates and tariffs, or rates and taxes, as we used to call them. Van der Kloof is in the municipality of Renosterberg, which is Van der Kloof and its township, Kerkiekloof, or Kerkieskloof if you prefer, Phillipstown and its township, I don't know its name, and between the two, Phillipstown is about 60 kilometers away. This is a very remote region of a very sparsely settled region of the Northern Cape. Between Phillipstown and ourselves lies Pietersville with its township. It turns out that no properties were re-evaluated in Phillipstown or its township, apparently anyway. So we're being told. They haven't even been informed that such a thing is forthcoming. And no properties have been re-evaluated in Pietersville and its township. And no properties were re-evaluated in our township of Kerkieskloof. Depending upon which signboard you read, Kerkiekloof or Kerkieskloof. Only in Van der Kloof, the brazen racism, the brass neck milking is astonishing, if nothing else. And they haven't been shy about it either. My property's value has supposedly gone up from 390,000 rand to 880,000 rand. Who knew? Who knew that my property is worth at least 300,000 rand, at least 300,000 rand more than anybody would actually ever pay for it? Some properties in the town have been re-evaluated by an increase of 450%. You can scarcely credit the shameless milking that they are lining up for. And that is a completely separate thing to the news that we have received in the last week. I want to quote: "Despite unsettling times," this is on dearsouthafrica.co.za, but you can find it reported in many places, "municipalities have proposed significant rates and tariff increases across the board in their budget." Now, it turns out that there is a proposed legislative change in the offing here. So far, I don't have clarity, and I haven't come across any reporter who has proper clarity on the matter. So time will yet tell. But certainly what has been reported is this: we're going to put up the prices. There is the and there is the increase in the evaluations or the valuations. Now, the two might be one and the same thing. It may be that they're angling to put up your rates and taxes through an increase in your property value. Your property is worth much more, so you must pay much more. However, where this gets tricky is that there has been at least one report that I've read that there is a proposed legislative change which suggests something completely different. In other words, we say that your property is worth double what we said last time, therefore we can charge you much more municipal rates. Later on, the law has been changed to allow us to charge you more again municipal rates. Presumably, there are legal guidelines. Let's say, for instance, that they're only allowed to charge you 1% of your property's value, just for the sake of a number. R1 million, you have to pay 10,000 rand a month if your house is worth R1 million. Of course, that's incorrect, but be patient with me. Now, if they say that your property is worth 2 million rand, you've got to pay 20 grand a month. If they then change the law and permit themselves to charge you 1.5%, then you will go from 10 to 15 to 20 to 30,000 rand a month as two completely separate exercises. Ladies and gentlemen, I think, again, I must use the expression, the writing is on the wall in this country. The very biggest event that we can report on, and the last for today, is the what might be described as the Israel, Gaza, Iran, Red Heifer, Shiloh tabernacle drama. For those that don't know, I'll try to be very brief. As you know, Hamas invaded Israel on the 7th of October last year. And if you're on one of my groups, then you know that I'm one of those people who say that that was an Israeli endeavor from the beginning until the end, for various reasons. There's no way, given that they have bragged, a former president, a former prime minister, a former head of Shin Bet, a former head of Mossad, a former brigadier general, the list goes on, that they set up Hamas and they control it. They set it up as a counterweight to Fatah. There's no way that they didn't know that those guys were doing micro-like training for months in advance. All of the spies they have, they didn't know nothing. It's an absurd proposition. Equally absurd is the fact that the army wasn't mobilized for 7 hours. And the list goes on. There is not a shadow of a doubt that that was an Israeli operation. But let's say you disagree with me, it's fine. Hamas invaded Israel. Israel retaliated. The tensions rose and rose and rose. And in all of that drama, general drama, Turkey saying all sorts of things, Iran saying all sorts of things, the Israelis struck with a missile the Irani embassy, consulate actually, in Damascus, killing either 7 or 8 Irani generals who were allegedly present. There's no confirmation of that. And in being present were allegedly plotting retaliation upon Israel for what Israel is perpetrating in Gaza. Since then, that was on the 1st of April. On the 13th of April, the Iranis retaliated by sending in 300 and something airborne vehicles, drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles, many of which were shot down, but many of which successfully penetrated Israel's defenses. When I say many of which, it was perhaps 5%. Doesn't matter. That number being 10 or 12 or 15 that successfully went through did a tremendous amount of harm, because if nothing else, they struck 2 very, very important Israeli air bases. So it's well and good that the Israelis may have shot down 90 or 95% of those vehicles. It is very well and good, but it's the sort of circumstance in which that counts less than the 5 or 10% that got through. Besides which, it made Iran look terribly good on the stage of the Muslim world, and it gave Iran a fantastic, unprecedented insight into the layering and location of Israel's air defenses, something hitherto completely unknown. All of that information would have been sent back by computer communications to Iran as it was being encountered, as the radars were locking onto the drones and the other vehicles, so that information would have been relayed to Iran. Iran would have gotten an insight like the world has never ever seen of another nation's 21st century anti-missile, anti-aircraft air defense system. But there's more to talk about, and that's why I really brought it up. Many of you will know that in the book of Numbers, chapter 19, a direction is given to purify the people. And to this day, in this context, it is understood that Israel wishes to build the third temple. Now, this happens to be a field in which I specialize. I don't say I know more than some people who've been observing this for years and years and years, but I know more than most. And I make that point not to be vain or conceited, to brag, but because I am well aware that what I'm about to say is going to be controversial for many, many people. Many people are going to do their nuts that I would ever say this. A conservative Christian, one of us. However, I do my research not among the pastors, Besides, nobody has enough lifetimes to listen to so many contradictions. There's no point doing the research. There's no point anybody doing the research, because you would just become bewildered. Of the 390 different opinions, how many would you master in your lifetime? 12, but it was the 13th that was right. There's no point. So I focus on, rightly or wrongly, what the Jewish rabbis have to say about this matter. I endeavor to get an insight into what prompts, what inspires the big movements in the world. In the world of finance, which is overwhelmingly Jewish owned, whether you like that, you don't like that, you think that's a good thing for the Jews, you think that's a bad, doesn't matter. I get paid a salary, and I endeavor to be able to communicate very well with Mr. Miller, and in the interviews that I do all around the world every week, and in the WhatsApp, the Saitlanders Leaders WhatsApp groups, about what may be going on in the world of finance. Likewise, media, likewise, these events here. So in the book of Numbers, there are directions given about slaughtering a red heifer and purifying, flicking blood onto the tabernacle and burning the heifer and mixing the ashes and putting it on a piece of cedar with hyssop branches, something like an old-fashioned straw broom, a stick with branches like that, tied with a crimson or a purple string, depending upon the translation, and sprinkling the people to purify them. If you work with the dead in Judaism, that's something that you would want. That would cleanse you. In Judaic law, the list goes on. And there is also an understanding that the little boys, they're not little anymore, that were selected almost 35 years ago, and who have been living in preparation in a compound. You will struggle to corroborate this, but I can assure you that it's true. In another video, I'll explain more. In Israel, that technically, legalistically, doesn't touch the soil. So these little boys, have never been sullied. They've never been dirtied. They've never been contaminated. They've never been polluted by something that touches the soil. They've been kept pure in that way, and they've been prepared for the rebuilding of the temple. I'm oversimplifying a lot, but we'll cover more ground in the other videos. And it turns out that right now they are preparing to burn the red heifer on an altar at Shiloh, not in Jerusalem, at Shiloh, the threshing floor of Shiloh, David's threshing floor. So there must be a tabernacle built. Tabernacle is effectively a tent, to keep things simple. Marquee, if you like, for these purposes. And both parties in this conflict are aware of it. We have now heard that the Arab world believes that Israel is preparing to destroy the Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock mosques on the Temple Mount in order to build the third temple, which will, according to some rabbis, usher in and herald the Messiah. And it is a race against time for them. So likewise, the Muslim world feels that it's in a race against time to smash this endeavor to pieces. The plot is very, very thick, ladies and gentlemen. But we're running out of time ourselves. This video has now been over 31 minutes long. Let's call it a day. I look forward to seeing you again next week, where we might talk some more about this, or perhaps I'll make a special series of videos. So, on that note, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye, and God bless all of you.